Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, on the Mediterranean island of Corsica. He went to school on the mainlands of France and went on to graduate from the French Military Academy in 1785. He then became a second lieutenant in the artillery regiment of the French army. Napoleon always wanted to marry someone to help gain more respect from his officers. Within 10 years of serving, Napoleon got what he wanted and was promoted to Major General. This was around the time Napoleon was invited to a party by one of the directors, Paul Barras. This was where he was introduced to Marie Joseph Rose de Beauharnais, his soon-to-be wife.
Rose, who we now know as Josephine, her lover Barras, was in search of a mistress and needed to hand off Rose to somebody else. Knowing Napoleon was looking for a wife, he convinced him that Rose was suitable. The two were then introduced. Both Rose and Napoleon wanted to get married for the same reason, for legitimacy and advancement of their reputation. Napoleon wanted to be higher in ranking in the force, and by having a wife, he'd be taken more seriously. Josephine, on the other hand, wanted to be more than just a widowed mistress to many. After the party, Napoleon was swooned and began to pursue Rose, but before he could get close, he decided he didn't like the name Rose and made her switch it to Josephine. Josephine was not keen on the idea, but after months of persistent pursuit, Josephine still refused to marry Napoleon due to how well off she was with her current lover, Barras.
Soon after, Barras had found a new mistress and broke the news to Josephine that he could not afford to have two mistresses. Josephine was heartbroken and refused to believe that Barras was leaving her. Barras explained that she was very expensive as a mistress because she lived such a luxurious life. Barras threatened her that if she did not marry Napoleon Bonaparte, she would be left out on the streets to fend for herself. Not long after she was given this awful news, Napoleon proposed to her in January of 1796, and the couple got married on March 9, 1796. The wedding was luxurious and big, as Napoleon had great dreams for their future, and his wedding present to Josephine was a gold medallion inscribed with the words, "To Destiny."
The same year that Napoleon helped the French army ultimately defeat their rivals of Austria. In the beginning of their marriage, Josephine despised Napoleon and thought he was a total bore. While Napoleon was busy away at war, Josephine was not faithful and decided to explore other options. All this time, Josephine pretended to miss Napoleon, but she was attending balls and parties, committing adultery. During the time of Napoleon's officers, Murat returned to Paris and attended one of the parties Josephine had also attended. Prior to the return to Paris, Napoleon had sent back Murat with the intent to escort Josephine to Napoleon in Italy, whether she was willing to go or not. Instead of bringing Josephine back to Italy to Napoleon, Murat brought back the news that Josephine was pregnant.
While Murat was in Paris, he heard gossip about Josephine and how she was making a complete fool out of Napoleon. Napoleon, being the good husband that he was, wanted to leave the Italian campaign to be with his pregnant wife. However, Barras made sure that this did not happen, as he was making a lot of money on this war. Barras then ordered Josephine to go to Napoleon, which she then obeyed. Everyone was expecting her to arrive pregnant, but she followed up with the story of having a miscarriage to complete her lie. He was torn with grief over losing his son due to the fact that he was desperate for a male heir. Soon after this, the Italian campaign ended, which would mean Napoleon would return home, making it hard for Josephine to continue her promiscuous lifestyle.
In 1798, Barras ordered Napoleon to go to Egypt to invade of what we now know as Israel, allowing Josephine to return back to her scandalous ways. At this time, Napoleon stayed faithful and was genuinely in love with Josephine, unaware of her infidelity. Napoleon's secretary, out of the corner of his eye, noticed Napoleon and Junot walking together. Junot told him of Josephine's infidelity, and he was outraged and wished to expose her. Josephine learned that Napoleon had found out of her affairs and made every attempt to prove to him that she would begin to be faithful wife to him. However, he had lost all respect he had for her. Josephine had finally fallen in love with Napoleon very deeply, but unfortunately she was too late. They remained husband and wife, but from that point on, he was not his faithful husband and sought out for revenge on Josephine for breaking his heart. Strangely, she had now been a faithful wife, but the tables were turned. Napoleon had mistress after mistress.
Not only was this the beginning of their crumbling marriage, but since Josephine was a few years older, she was not able to have kids. Napoleon did not divorce her until he had an heir. Now, although Napoleon did not love Josephine, he did hold a deep devotion for her 2 children from her previous marriage. When Hortense, Josephine's daughter, and her brother Louis had a son, Napoleon declared him as his heir and then divorced Josephine. This was the exact reason Napoleon got an annulment.
Napoleon still wanted an heir of his own blood. He began making negotiations to marry Marie Louise, a younger, more fertile woman, to help make him legitimize his claim to royalty. However, to marry Marie Louise, whom he renamed Marie Louise, he first had to divorce Josephine. Finally, on December 15, 1809, the couple announced their decision to end their marriage. The following January, the distraught Josephine and Napoleon signed official documents in front of the court.
In conclusion, Napoleon and Josephine's relationship was a prime example of this time period, of how marriage should not be conducted. Although they married for economic reasons and status, the way the marriage played out was ultimately frowned upon. Josephine and Napoleon really rejected their societal norms of this time by committing adultery by exploring other partners while married. Not only did they both commit adultery, but he had divorced her after she was unable to bear children, which was unusual for this time period. Divorcing a woman of that age was not a thing that happened. If a woman was not able to bear children and you divorced her, what made her eligible for someone else to marry her? During this time, society's attitudes towards marriage was that once you were married, you did not divorce nor did you commit adulterous acts. Due to the low life expectancy, once you were married, you were partners for life, and then children were to follow. Women would take care of the kids and the house, and the men would provide for the family, being breadwinners. A woman's main role was solely to bear children and to be a housewife. Gender roles in this time period were huge, and woman's sole purpose was to be a mother and a caretaker of the children.